And now it has been reviewed by several people.
It's a kind of a unique and amazing book, ma'am. As I think, because the stories that I heard, I never imagined in my life, actually.
Nor did I. Nor did I. Yeah, that's true.
Then shall we start, Ganesh, or yeah?
I think in between the people will join actually. I think so.
Okay,
We'll start formally. I welcome all of you on behalf of Speaking from Margin. Speaking from Margin is a completely student steering academic platform for research scholars, social political activists, and students to engage with the contemporary debates and discourses on social sciences. It attempts to build academic solidarity for social justice in higher education. We operate this space to build solidarity among researchers from various marginal locations to engage with the evolving knowledge paradigm of the academic sphere. In the past, we have organized several lectures and book discussions, which has been received overwhelming responses from the academic communities. Our past speakers include Professor Kanchai Laya, Professor Rajiv Bhargav, Professor Satish Deshpande, Professor Nandini Sundar, Professor Nivedita Menon, Dr. Sudhir Kumar Suthar, Professor Minaketan Behera, Professor Soumyabrot Chaudhary, Dr. Nasreen Chaudhary, Professor Neera Chandok, Professor Zoya Hassan, Professor N. Sukumar, and Professor Maitri Chaudhary, among others, contributed their valuable academic thoughts into this forum. Today, we are extremely delighted to begin our book discussion series of the book titled Voices from the Lost Horizon, Stories and Songs of the Great Andamanis, published in 2021 with its author, Professor Anvita Abbi. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
And we have also one student discussion, Ramjan Sheikh. So Professor Abbi is a distinguished researcher on minority languages and perhaps the only one in Indian subcontinent who has done vast and field study on all 6 language families from the Himalayas to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Professor Abbi taught linguistics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University for 38 years and was the president of the Linguistic Society of India, and has been invited as a visiting professor and researcher at prestigious institutions in the USA, Europe, Canada, and Australia. She served long as an expert for UNESCO on issues concerning languages. She has written 22 books, including the Dictionary of Great Andamanese Language, a Grammar of the Great Andamanese Language, an ethno-linguistic study, and co-edited several books like Language and the State, Perspective on the 8th Schedule. During her studies in 2003 and 2004, she identified a new language family in India, the Great Andamanese, which has corroborated in 2005 by population genetics. The government of India recognized her pioneering work and she was awarded the Padma Shri in 2013. In 2015, she received the Kenneth Hale Award, the most prestigious award in linguistics, for her outstanding contribution to the documentation and description of Indian languages from the Linguistic Society of America. Professor Abbi taught linguistics at the, and now our student discussant, Ramjan Sheikh. Ramjan Sheikh is a doctoral candidate at the Department of Political Science, University of Delhi. His research area includes indigenous knowledge and politics and tribal policies in Andaman. So I would not take too much time and I invite to Ramjan for the process this discussion ahead.
Thank you, Ganesh. Firstly, I want to congratulate Professor Abbi for this book and express our gratitude for accepting the invitations to today's discussion. Through the discussions like this, we are trying to allow our audience and participants to interact with experts and authors from various social science disciplines. This series is also an attempt on our side APA to address the issue of accessibility faced by students and researchers from marginal spaces, universities located remotely from the space of knowledge sharing platform, and try to minimize the gap as much as possible. To start the discussion, the book is mainly related to the language of great Andamanis. It plays a crucial role in preserving the memories of the great Andamanis through the songs and the stories of one of the world's vanishing language. The book offers an emic perspective of the great Andamanese worldview facing extinction. It's also challenging the narration, generally describing the tribal communities as uncivilized and present the hidden inner beauties of their thought or world that is amazing to know through this book. The book has a delightful collection of 10 stories and 46 poems of great Andamanis that representing a different form of culture, language, lived experiences, and a worldview of the community that is different from those written and told in the mainstream language. This book is a result of 22 years of Professor Abi's continuous and excellent research effort, and it is significant because it is documented and codified a language, memory, and associated vocabulary who is the end of its journey, the great Andamanis, and also because the language has no more living speakers. Professor Abi recollected a language that the speakers themselves forgot. This salvage task was difficult, and I think because she was trying to make them remember what they had forgotten long back, and also because they had no motivation and courage to speak that language again. But even though this book shows us the labor of love and the author and speaker's effort to give life to a lost or oral heritage of the vanishing world of the great Andamanis, it was difficult for the author to win the trust of the community. When the author started her research within the community, most of the older people had forgotten the language that ma'am already mentioning some time ago, and most of the older people had forgotten the language or the art of narration, and the younger ones amalgamated themselves with the Andamani Sindhi and didn't know anything about their own language. In the starting period, it is difficult for the author to remind language to a community who are neither willing to share their folk tales nor found any utility in remembering them. The hope emerged when the author knew that some people from the communities knew some of the stories and songs. The invisible co-authors of the book or the last speaker of the language, Boa Senior and now Junior. Unfortunately, they are no more with us, but were also in the same condition as others, because they knew some of the stories but hesitate to speak the language or forgotten the language and their narration. But to build trust with the community and revive the language, the author shared a lot of time and followed the activity of the community's daily life to gain that trust, especially with the now Junior. It was the continuation effort of the author due to which this research got momentum, but also an example of trust that helped the speakers to remember their language again and encourage them to revive their language, because language is the major source to revive any culture, tradition, and practice. The book is a result of a collaborative and sympathetic effort between the linguist Professor Abi and the speakers of Great Andamanis, now Junior and Boa Senior, who speak the language. This research and the book shows us a masterpiece of that effort and patience of the author. When I was reading the book, I was totally lost in it and involved in a way that made me interested. My engagement with the book takes me to a world that I never imagined, a world that shows the true nature of relationship between humans and nature. And I can only think about the way through which these stories, such as one of the stories in the book, Partajito, described the creation myth, the 5 elements of nature, love, and the creation of the partner. Never heard in my life. The story of Maya Zero Meter, the other story, which describes relationship with the birds and thinking them as their ancestors, fascinated me while I was reading the story. Narrating a story about how a community named the birds after the name of their ancestor. As a reader, when I engage with the book, as I experienced, it tried to involve you in more than just reading a text, but giving you an experience as a part of the community and with their journey. For example, some songs in the book successfully shows their culture or knowledge about nature and how it was destroyed over time. For example, a Bo song that is "Let's go to a clean place where we can dance, dance and dance" shows that their happiness comes not from materialistic pleasure, but through the companionship with their community and nature. Shows their indigenous knowledge about hunting practices through the song that is "When the sun sets, find lots of hunt." It shows that they have a knowledge system to survive, but are unfortunately not accessible to practice now. Like their feelings and bondings with their ancestors appeared in one of the Bo songs that is "Worship them who are dead, worship your ancestors," presenting a cultural value that is not popular, or as I can say, not in the mainstream society, because they associate their ancestors with nature. These are just the glimpse of the book, but it has a great narratives of stories and songs describing the cultural and spiritual affiliation of the community with the nature. As most of our participants are from the social science background and here and there can relate themselves to the book, the context through which this book engages, such as linguistic minorities and tribal rights, is a contested issue in the national and international politics. Within this broader debate, this book presents the reality and the questions the narratives associated with the tribal culture that portrays the hunting gathering communities as uncivilized and barbaric, who lived in a natural society, or as many say, in the state of nature or in anarchical culture. As Hobbes explained, as he said that state of nature is a condition of a selfish, brutish, nasty, poor and short mindset. But the book, through the stories and the songs of the great Andamanis, challenges that notion and presents the hidden inner beauties of their thought or the world that is amazing to know. But with the death of the tribe's last speakers, Bua Senior and now Junior, their ancestors' language, the ancient language, their unique worldview, folk tales and songs would also have died, which could not be documented. Also, as we know that most of the tribal knowledge traditions are oral and in the condition of dilapidation, because either the speakers are not getting the opportunity and encouragement to speak, or are getting no recognition because of their less population and lack of interest in mainstream political forms and institutions that demeans their cultural identity and survival options. And now, as a researcher and a reader, I am curious to know from the author, Professor Abi, about her journey of research and the history of writing about the book. And I think our audience is as well. Now, Professor Abi, over to you, ma'am. Now the floor is yours. You have 30 to 40 minutes to elaborate and discuss the book and tell us about your experience while researching and writing the book. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ramazan, and thank you, Ganesh, for introducing me. I think Ramazan has very aptly reviewed and analyzed the book. I'm very happy that you did it because it appears to be simple, but when you get deeper into it, you realize all the metaphysical meanings involved in a couple of short stories. Well, since you asked me to describe my journey, I'm a linguist by training, and mm, I got training in America. My PhD was from Cornell, and then I came back and joined JNU and taught, as Ganesh mentioned to you, for 38 years in JNU, linguistics. And I developed a course called Field Linguistics while being in JNU, where we worked on most of the time. I took my students to the field and gave them training how to work on minority languages. And during that phase of working on minority languages, I came across the knowledge that there are very ancient civilization tucked in Andaman on whose language almost no work is available. I mean, there was a work, not one, but two or three of them, but they were very scanty and they were not very deep enough to unearth the structure of the language. So I was fascinated by that. In 2001, I did a pilot survey of the Andaman Islands from north to south, and also there are two islands. One is known as Great Andaman, and in the south to Great Andaman, there is another one which is known as Little Andaman, 100 nautical miles away from the city of Port Blair. I went and stayed with the tribes Great Andamanis, Jarawa, and Onge, all three, and I studied their language. I did the comparative work and came to the conclusion that Great Andamanis is a class apart. Before me, most of the people thought that Andamanis languages constitute one rubric, and under which all the three languages come. But that was not true. And I presented my results at Max Planck Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany. And most of the scientists felt that I should drop everything, whatever I have in my hand, and work on Great Andamanis intensively because the language was dying. So in 2005, I got a grant from School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, and I started my work in 2005. And I really immersed myself because I worked with Great Andamanis. There were 9 speakers when I reached the island. But by the time, in the next 3-4 years, in fact, the next 7 years, most of the speakers died of various kinds of ailments, not COVID. During COVID also, we lost one good speaker, a very good friend of mine. She had become a very good friend, but she did not die of COVID, but something else. Anyway, so I was seeing that the language was, every speaker was vanishing from this earth, taking away a plethora of knowledge tucked in their languages, and there is no way to preserve it. So the best thing is to document as much as you can, as speedily as one can. And that's what I tried to do. So I wrote a grammar of the language. We prepared an interactive dictionary, which you may like to see. It's it's actually an encyclopedia, you can say, because it has images, it has sound files. So you can hear the words in the voices of the Great Andamanis people. Every word has a sound file, and there are all other indigenous knowledge tucked in there, what is the concept of space and so on and so forth. During that time, when I realized that they were not giving me enough data for writing grammar, I started asking about the songs. And this happened in 2005. And as you know, in December 2004, the tsunami came. And all these Great Andamanis people were dislocated or relocated in Port Blair in a relief camp. So we went to the relief camp. One way it was good because we saw all the speakers under one roof. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to hunt for them from house to house. But the atmosphere was very melancholy. And atmosphere was you can imagine, you have lost your house, you've lost your land, everything is submerged, you're dislocated. And in that situation, I, like a fool, was asking them to sing a song. It almost appeared to be antithesis of the life that they were living. However, Boa Senior, one elderly lady, whom we called Chachi, she was 85 years old, or 84, she obliged after a little coaxing. Initially, she used to say, "Roz roz aa jate hain tang karne ke liye," that kind, because she didn't want to sing. But gradually, when she started singing, I think she started also enjoying singing because that made her forget her woes and pain of losing the land and being dislocated. So she gave us something to the tune of 66 songs. But in this book, I have only published 46 because the other 20 I'm not very sure with the translation. I could translate them, but not with great accuracy. So I have not brought those out, but these 46 songs have been translated with the help of Boa Senior's rendering of Hindi plus my own judgment because I had learned the language of hers as well as others members. So this is a rare book because I realized this is the first ever documentation of oral tradition of Great Andamanis. And now you can also say that it is also the last ever documentation because the speakers are no more. Only 3 speakers are left. And as I was telling Ramzan before we started the session that I visited them just 2 weeks ago in Port Blair. And I was very sorry to see that all 3 of them have lost their language. They could not remember any sentence that I asked for or very few words they had remembered. And they said, Madam, you know better than us. So that was I did not take it as a compliment. I was very, very depressed to hear that sentence. So it was a big challenge to work on oral tradition of a language or to document an oral tradition, write a grammar, capture the entire language structure in a dying language, the language which is on the verge of its extinction. Because most of the time, the speakers say that we don't remember anything, you go away. And what do? And you cannot coax them. So I employed a different kind of methodology. The main narrator of the 10 stories on this book are narrated by Now Junior. He was also called Neely as a dark now. And Now Junior was, initially he refused. He was a very soft-spoken person. He said, I don't remember anything, ma'am, you go away. And later on when I, tried to tell him that once we were sitting by the side of the seashore, it was very hot. We both had our feet dipped into water in the sea. And I just mentioned like that. I said, now you may remember something when you were a kid, when your father took you away in the boat to hunt turtles or dugong. And he suddenly remembered something. And he said, yes, I do remember something. Let me think about it and I'll let you know. And in this book, as you may notice, people who have read this book will also realize, I have tried to build in the narratives, the narrative of how did I collect this information or the stories. Because quite a few of my literary friends said that, Anvita, we want to know that how do you elicit stories and songs from a language which is dying? What is the methodology? And to be very frank, before going to the Andaman, I had never come across a language which was dying. I had been working on lesser known languages all my life in JNU, but never ever I came across a language which was on the verge of its extinction. So I had to develop my own methodology for that. And what I realized that the best methodology is to share as much as possible the life of the person that you're asking the story from, and make him or her remember his past. And that you can only do it in natural habitat, the places that he walked as a child, the places that he hunted as a child. So I walked with Now Junior in the jungles and the swamps. We crossed, we went from south to north of Andaman, which is quite a distance, and so on and so forth. I spent a lot of time with the Andamanis. By now they consider me as one of their family members. So this was very, their trust, their love, and their confidence. I did not win overnight. It took me quite a while and quite an effort. But then later on it became effortless because then I became part of them. And whenever I would visit Port Blair, I would just give them the information that I'm here. They will all throng into my room and just sit there and have chai with me and we'll talk. And so this is how, I elicited a lot of information. In this whole process, once I asked them I was collecting names of the birds because that whole area, the entire Southeast Asia is known for diversity of birds also. Excuse, excuse me. So once I was getting all the names of the words, and now Junior said that we have so many words for birds because there is a story in which all the humans, the Andamanis, become birds. It's right there. bahar na. So, so sorry for my sore throat. So I said, why don't you tell me the story in which all the humans become birds? And this is how the Jiro Meete came up, because in Jiro Meete I realized that the whole story is about how this is another creation tale, as a matter of fact, but the creation of the biodiversity of birds. So this is an interesting story, though National Book Trust also published it for children's under children's series, and it has become a very popular book by now. So this was another very unusual aspect, because most of the time the kind of creation tales I've heard or I've read, even the Panchtantra ones, in which the birds and animals take human shapes, but here it is the reverse. The humans take the animals, and birds, they become fauna. So this was interesting, but the most interesting story is the creation myth, the first story in the book of Pherta Jido. Phor or Pher is a bamboo, and Ta Jido means born of. So the first human being was born of a bamboo. That was the myth. So it's very interesting. This is the thing, that the first human being was born of a bamboo. And as Ramzan mentioned, the interesting part of the story is that this is also one of the unique creation tales that I have come across, where the protagonist creates his own partner. Generally, even in the biblical story, the man and woman are created by God. But here the man is born out of bamboo, and he creates his wife or his partner, you see. So now Junior narrated this story so many times to me, and every time he had tears in his eyes, and he says this is the biggest love story he has ever heard in his life. And he thought this was the biggest love story, and I think he's right. If you read the story, it does turn out to be a very big love story. And he would never get tired of narrating this again and again. But as I've written my book, it took me more than a year to complete the story, because we linguists generally work with every morpheme, every word, every sentence, you see. So to get an exact translation, I had to visit him several times in a year, because JADU never give you very long leave to do field work. So I had to use my vacation, I had to use my medical leaves, I had to do all kinds of, I used my leaves to work on this language. And so it took me a year, but once it was complete, I also got hold of several cultural aspects of the community. And once he started narrating now, he got himself immersed into the project. And every time he'll go back home and he'll think about another story at night. And sometimes he used to tell me that he got the whole story remembered, but it was 3 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock at night. He didn't feel like coming and disturbing me. So he would wait till the dawn appears, and then he'll come and knock at my door. And, he said, "Mujhe kahani sunani hai, you have to hear me out." So, it became like a joint project. And this is how I collected stories. And most of the stories are in this book are given free English translation. But for linguists, we also have a morpheme to morpheme or word to word translation available, because now I know the language, so it can be done. But initially it was very difficult, because once the language, as I said, was dying. The second is there was no written literature available to bank upon, you see. Britishers did study the languages of South Great Andaman when Kalapani or this Port Blair was made the penal colony in 1858. But they had not worked on the North Andamanese languages. And the present Great Andamanese are the conglomeration of four North Great Andamanese languages: Bo, Sare, Khora, and Jeru. These are the four languages names. The combination of this, or you can say, the lexicon are derived. You know, every language is a kind of a mixed. For example, English is a mixed language. It derives so many words from French and German, but the grammar is English, you see. Same here, the grammar is Jero, but it derives words from Bo, Sare, Khora, and so on and so forth. So this was the language which was not very easy to understand. As it is, it's very unique language, very, very different from the rest of the languages of mainland India. But it took me a while to crack the puzzle of the grammar. Once I did, then translating these stories also became easy. But before I go forward, let me first give you a little introduction about the Andaman, the Great Andaman, and why it is important, this community, why it is important, you see, why I was so much fascinated by this community to work upon, and why I thought the language plays a very significant role, not only from linguistics point of view, but also point of view from the ancient civilization, culture, history, and migration. So let me try to share my, yeah. I'll try to share my PowerPoint. Can you see this?
Yes, ma'am. We can see your screen.
Okay. Now is the PowerPoint being shown? Let me.
Yes, now it is visible.
Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the map of Southeast Asia, and as you can see, the Andaman Nicobar Islands are far away from Kolkata or Chennai, 1500 kilometers, very close to Myanmar. And these are the set of 346 islands. This is the another right hand, another map. This is Great Andaman and this is Little Andaman. And when I was telling you about my pilot survey, I traveled from northernmost point to the southernmost point of Little Andaman to do the comparative study of the three languages spoken there: Great Andamanese, Jarawa, and Onge. Right now, I'm working on these languages of the Nicobar Islands. The languages of these two islands are already complete. The study is already complete. Anyway, so this is the rough map to show you the location. If you look at from the aerial point of view, that Andaman Islands actually are the tips of very high range of mountains of Arakan range, which extends from Burma. So these are submerged in water. So the tip of the mountains are now seen as islands, you see. So this is a relief map. You can see that how the islands are there, or must have been formed. Most of the islands have in between creeks like these, and swamped by mangroves, very thick mangroves. The whole island looks very lush green because of that. But these creeks are not very innocent creeks. They are laden with huge crocodiles. And when I was traveling through creeks of these kind, you can imagine my plight, how scary it is. But one has to do it. So I also enjoyed the nature. This is from a distance. You can see this is one of the Jarawa jungles. The real map of the seashore and the jungle. So it's a very thick jungle actually, and it's very difficult to walk in the jungle because of the mangrove roots are very intertangled among them. But the most interesting part is that the Great Andamanis are considered to be the remnants of the very first, migration, very first migration out of Africa 70,000 years ago. So these are the Homo sapiens who came from Africa 70,000 years ago and settled in Great Andaman. And this has also been proven that till the Britishers came to Port Blair and made it a penal colony, Great Andamanis did not come into contact with any other community, not even the tribes who lived on the same island like Jarawa. So that's why their language seemed to be very archaic in nature and not very much contaminated by other languages. According to my own research, it appears to be there seems to be two migrations from different regions and perhaps at different times, former of the Great Andamanis and the latter of the Onge and Jarawa. Come to think of it, they are the very first Indians, or you can say first citizens of India, because 70,000 years is a long history of survival. So they know the secret of survival. They were hunter and gatherer till 1858, and after that also they continued hunting in the sea as well as in the forest, but gradually they came into the main fold of mainstreaming. This is the path of migration that took place, and as you can see, from Africa they came about 70,000 years ago. They came to India, and then the rest of them, the offshoot of them, went to Papua New Guinea and Australia and other places. So this is why I was so much fascinated to study this language and to record their oral tradition, because I realized that they are the remnants of one of the earliest civilizations on this earth, which is still surviving. I mean, there are tribes in Amazonia, Amazonan forest and other places, but they are not as old as the Great Andamanis are. They are the very first settlers of Southeast Asia and South Asia. This is a picture of Boa Senior. Chachi used to call her. She's the main singer of the 46 songs that are given in this book. And the picture was taken in the relief camp. This picture was taken at Strait Island because the community lives in Strait Island. After tsunami, they were relocated again in the same place, but it is in very bad shape. As you can see, the maintenance of their huts are not being done by the government, and they have given them tin roof, which becomes very hot, and they don't like it. So anyway, so this is another picture of with some children, community members, and the other two elders. She's no more. Boa Senior died. She was the last speaker of Khora language. She also died. This is a picture of the community. Some of the members of the community who were there in Strait Island the day when I was living there, because they keep frequenting between Port Blair and the Port Blair and Strait Island. This is the map of Strait Island, where it is, I call it my Karam Bhumi, because that's where I lived most of the time with the Andamanis. It looks like a comma, and it is 56 kilometers nautical miles away from the city of Port Blair. This is a picture of Now Junior. I call him my guru because he taught me the language, gave me a lot of indigenous knowledge about the community, the language and culture. And these are some of the artifacts which are stocked at the Museum of Leipzig in Germany. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of the artifacts of Andaman and Nicobar are not Nicobar, but Andaman especially, are curated in Germany, and these are very old, of 19th century. These are the arrows and bows, which are very different from any other tribal community in Andaman. These are Great Andamanis. This is a bamboo bucket, which has been mentioned many times in the stories also. And this is a girdle that they knit with all kinds of leaves. and the thread of the creeper. This is a sirbele, they call it a girdle. This is a girdle made by Boa Senior. As you can see, she's making the girdle and with at the tsunami camp. And then she presented me this as a token of love. So this was very telling. While I was collecting the names of the words, this is a book on Great Andamani's names and classification culture of birds, which I did with another ornithologist, Satish Pandey. And during the collection of the names of these birds, we came across the story of Jiro Meete. So this research also paved way for many other researches, like how do the words are formed linguistically, and how do the birds convey the meaning. Most of the names of the birds are not opaque, unlike in Hindi and English. Since they have ancestral names, the names of the ancestors are there, and most of the birds' names are transparent in meaning. For example, in English or Hindi, the bird Katphorwa means the one who pecks at wood, right? Katphorwa. And in English also it's called woodpecker. Woodpecker, so the bird which pecks at wood. Similarly, in Andamanese, most of the birds, when you do morphological analysis or Sandhi Vigrah, you realize that the names are not opaque, but they have meaning, and the meaning is generally describing either the nature of the bird or the description of the bird or nesting habits, or whether the associated calls are have some meaning to it. So it's very interesting. By just looking or analyzing the names of the birds, one does come to know of a lot of culture. This is another picture of Now Junior, the narrator of the short stories given here. And this is the book that we are talking about, Voices from the Lost Horizons, Stories and Songs of the Great Andamanis, available at Amazon. The book is full of beautiful illustrations by Subir Roy. And this is another very famous story where the protagonist sits or sleeps on the back of the Ridley turtle. Now, unfortunately, Government of India, I'm told, is going to get rid of all these vegetation. 1.5 lakh trees are going to be cut in Andaman and Nicobar, and the area where the Ridley turtles used to come and nest will be totally gone. But that's a separate issue. So this is just a small bird's eye view I wanted to give you about the Andaman, and this sort of appraises you where Andamans are and where are they located, what is their topography. Now, coming back to this stories also, there are interesting aspects about supernatural powers. There are a couple of stories which talks about supernatural powers, including mention of cannibalism. But I realized that cannibalism, that was this question I was always being asked, are they cannibals? They are not cannibals, but the short stories does indicate that perhaps some people had some kind of supernatural power, because it was considered, cannibalism was considered a kind of a aberration of normal human beings. So the person who could be cannibal has supernatural, and that person is not very much respected in the stories, So it's very interesting. You have to read the stories to deduct your own meaning. But there's one woman, Juro. She's a cannibal, and then there's a real story that Now Junior tells me, in which he realizes that there were some people who were cannibals. So I'm not sure whether the Great Andamanis had a community who were cannibals, but through the story you do get to know these. However, the story of Juro was interesting because this is a woman who who devours of the blood of young people, and has the image of something like what Now Junior compared with Kali Devi. And he says, yeah, you also have Kali Devi. She also wears the necklace of Bundo Ki Wala, And she also has something, kind of a skull in her hand. So what do you think she was doing with all that? So I didn't debate with him, didn't argue with him, but I was amazed to see that he could see the comparison or the similarities between Juro and Kali of Hindu god. So there are other things also which exposed to me about their poor ways of cremation, which is very interesting. It also introduced me to there's a gender neutrality of the names. So the names of boys and girls are the same. There's no gender specific names. And this is because the names are given to the baby when he's or she's not born. It's in the womb. So the child named, for example, Boa Boa means earth actually, can be a male name or a female name. Jiraki can be a male name or a female name, and so on and so forth. So there are very interesting aspects of life and culture which are exposed through these stories. The other thing which I found, especially the Bharta Jidus is my favorite story, and this has become a favorite story of many others also. It talks about Panchabhuta, the 5 elements of life. And this is much, much before our Shastras ever came, because this is 70,000-year-old civilization, mind it. Not only that, there is the climax of the story is very telling. The protagonist, after living life on this earth, tells his wife that we have done enough. Now it's our time to go away. Let children lead the life of happiness. So she asks him, where will we go? And he points up above the clouds and he says, there we'll go. I'm sure there are people like us. So in the story, he throws a rope above him as far up as possible, and it gets stuck somewhere in the clouds. And he says, yes, it has gone to the right place. First he goes and checks it, whether it is a good place to go or not, comes down, and then he tells his wife, we should go. There are people like us. So he and his wife, they climb the rope, but the best part of the story is after climbing the rope, he snaps the rope. He completely cuts the rope, so there is no connection available to come back to the earth. Now this is the same situation as what we teach in Hindu mythology of Nirvana. You see? So totally as disassociating yourself with all the Maya Moha of the children, of the earth, of the pleasures and everything. And this is amazingly depicted that I was quite shocked actually when I was collecting the story, because he just stopped narrating after he says, and then he cut the rope, and that's it. So the rest, you deduct the meaning, which is very telling. So, I was very surprised that a story of that civilization, and we call them jungli and all kinds of, we have this idea, the city people have the idea that these people have no civilization, no culture. But more and more I have been to these places and to other tribes also, I have come to the conclusion it is we who are uncivilized. For example, they don't have a word for rape, you see, and they do not know what rape is. Especially Jarvas also told me when I was working on Jarva language, they do not know what is rape. They do not know what is molestation. They do not know what is sexual assault. There's no word for it. Now you tell me who is more civilized? Ask of them. You see? Because everything goes by consent. The woman has to give the consent before man gives in any advance. Even after marriage, they have the freedom to leave the husband and take another wife, another husband if they want to. She just has to tell in front of the society that I don't want to be with this person anymore. And it is agreed upon, you see. So the question of molestation doesn't come. It's very amazing society, very egalitarian. Women are also taught hunting, and they are not gathering. But later on, when they become mothers and they have to look after the house, they become more gatherers. But otherwise, they are also taught hunting. So, there are many other aspects which I won't go into it now. But the stories and the songs certainly depict a kind of civilization and culture which is very deviant from ours and very much advanced from ours, I must say. The kind of human relations that are depicted here and the kind of intimate relationship with nature, you see, is amazing. And that's why they have survived all these years, because they know how to negotiate with the natural disasters. We call them disasters. They don't call it disaster. They think it's a natural phenomenon. Tsunami also is a natural phenomena, and one should know how to cope with. So it's not some rocket science, and it's not a mystery or a wonder anymore that how come when tsunami came, none of the tribes died. None. Neither Jarawa, nor Unge, nor Great Andamanese. Not a single loss. But India lost 7,000 people in Andaman Nicobar itself. I'm not including Chennai. We lost 7,000 people like us who did not know how to save themselves or who did not know that tsunami was coming. While these people recognized by the very first few waves that tsunami kind of a thing is approaching, they ran for the shelter. And they have words in their language which depicts the this upheaval that took place in the sea, because as you remember, the sea waves ran up to the almost 10, 15 meters high. For them, for that phenomena, they have words. For before it reaches 10 meters, the smaller version also had their words in the language. In fact, I was quite amazed to see that they have 6 different words for seashores, because every seashore, the distance from the balu, the sand and the water, there are all kinds of seashores at the high tide and the low tide, where you can walk and see the lagoons and so on and so forth. It's amazing indigenous knowledge they have. And because of their knowledge, they could survive themselves even during tsunami. So this is an important aspect, that and several of them which got exposed through this. And let me tell you, because being a linguist, I never thought initially of working out on a book on short stories and on folk tales and on songs. But eventually, when I realized the language is dying, and then the linguists become very greedy, that document as much as you can, document as much as possible, I started collecting stories and I started collecting songs. And I realized today that good I did, because people are gone now. And if it not for this book, nobody would have known what their culture and civilization was. That is one of the oldest civilizations still surviving on this earth, the oldest. And their language is also one of the oldest, because I found some archaic structures in the language which are very unique. And I've traveled all across the globe giving lectures about this language structures among linguists, but nobody ever came up saying that this is very similar to X language or Y language. So the language also very archaic and unique, just like the stories are. And I really hope that you acquire this book as soon as possible, read it and gift it to children, to adults, so that others also to know about this civilization. And if you have any questions, you can always write to me. I'll be very happy to answer to you. My email is anvitaabbi@gmail.com. And I'm also on Wikipedia in case you want to know a little bit more about my work. It's not up to date, but still it gives you more or less accurate information. Thank you for inviting me, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions now if you have any.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an amazing stories that you have been narrated. It is not at all a story that is visual, it is a real, and that we can also imagine this kind of life, because when we read and read the various philosophers, that we provide it as a kind of utopian world that is only exists. But after listening you, it's visible that it is already and it is now also available, this kind of life that can be possible. So it is wonderful. So Ramzan, if you would have any questions, then you can go. And after that, we can collect some questions from our audience also. If those who have questions, then you can raise your hand. Then we can take the questions.
I want to little comment on that. Thank you, ma'am, for bringing this book to us, basically, and
I also have it.
And it's amazing, ma'am, for bringing the hidden knowledge gems that need to be highlighted with the courage and academic eagerness. And I think you have successful on that part of your mission. the book shows us the mirror through an example of how we treated the linguistic or the minority cultures as a human, or as we called ourselves as a developed civilization, and how much we gave them the space to practice their lifestyle or culture different from ours. As outsiders, we cannot imagine the condition of a community or the mental condition of the language last speaker when a language is on the verge of extinction, as no one is there to speak or who remembers the language. As in book mentions, the Boa senior, the last speaker of the Boa language, appeals to her interlocutors that don't let the language slip away. Keep a hold on it. It shows an affiliation and emotional attachment to her, of her to the language. However, the book gives us some sense of the condition that happens with the extinction of a language or replacing the language with the dominant one. When the language is dying, it obliterates the history, the culture, the ecological base, and its knowledge, their ethno-linguistic practices, and the identity of a community as well. And I have a little question, ma'am, that the front page, the front of this book, the image in this book, I want to know how it is come in practice and in this image, actually.
The cover page.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, the cover page is drawn by the artist. I have no role to play. He showed me a couple of pictures, paintings, and I approved only this one. It says designed by Navunita Das, cover illustration by Subir Roy. So Subir Roy actually has also done illustrations inside. He is a very good artist. He has a good reputation. And there are other illustrations which are beautiful, inside, especially in Bharta Jido's story. So this is added advantage. But the biggest fact which we forgot to mention is that the book comes with a QR code. After every chapter, there's a QR code, and you can scan it on your phone or wherever you want to. And it takes you to the website so you can watch the video of Boa singing, which is an amazing facility. Generally, my earlier books had a CD-ROM for audio files or video files or pen drive, and they used to get lost. But this is a very good idea that the publisher thought of putting a QR code. Now the technology is developed so much. So the moment you scan it, you immediately see Boa Senior singing one song after another and with the subtitles. So you get to know what is she saying. And their website, the Nyogi Publishers is upgrading their website. So you'd be able to hear more songs. Right now you'll be here to 10 or 12 songs, but afterwards you'll be able to hear all the 46 songs. So that's the biggest advantage of this book, which is also unique.
Now I open the floor for the questions of the participation. So they can raise their hand to speak, and if they are not comfortable with that, they can write it in the chat box so that we can read.
There's one person, Sanatan Karna. Thank you for a wonderful. What should be the role of government in reviving the tribal languages, knowledge as well as cultures? I mean that the language, knowledge and cultures of tribes are on the edge of disappearing. See, I had written about this many times. The government can do a lot. It can, number one, it can introduce the language, and now I have written 7 books on Andaman. They can introduce the book on several books, including the primer, and I gave the script to the language. So now this is a language which is also the written language. They can introduce in schools in Andaman itself to begin with. Actually, I think a note there should be chapters for all the Indian kids, because they are the biggest contributors of human evolution, actually. So they should be known to all the Indian kids. But before that, at least the administration of Andaman can introduce the language, the culture, the folklore of Andaman in Andaman to all the schools. And now these days, Andamanese children go to Vivekanand School. Vivekanand School certainly can introduce it in 0 hour. So there's not much pressure of examination or something. But the government is not doing anything. It's not that I have not suggested this to the government. I suggested it when in 2008 we brought out a primer and Varnmala. And it was Now Junior who helped me write the Varnmala. So we have I told the education secretary there that you should introduce this language. And the Andamanis themselves were willing to teach, but nothing happened. So that's the only way one can survive these language and cultures.
Nikhil, unmute yourself and
Hello, ma'am. My name is Nikhil, and I'm a PhD research scholar in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and I am working on social media. So, ma'am, I want to ask a question about the impact of social media in these indigenous communities. For example, postmodernist thinker Jean Lyotard has worked on the science and technology and social media. He says that in recent times, what is happening that social media and science and technology is preserving their culture. Means now they have archives. Now you can see what is their past glory and everything is stored now. So I want to ask you about, since you have worked on these things. So do you think that social media and science and technology helps in restoring their glory, past culture? Thank you.
Certainly it does. In fact, it's true that many other tribes within mainland India, for example, in Halbi, in Bastar area, I know quite a few of my tribal friends who had been uploading on YouTube the folk traditions of their community, the songs, the narrations, the stories, and cultural items also. But they have become very savvy in recording on their phone and uploading on YouTube. Similarly, many other tribes in the Northeast have done tremendous work on through social media to promote their language and culture. In Northeast, they have also shown interest in opening their own radio station. And thrice a week, that radio station airs their indigenous cultures, cultural songs, and stories about their culture and about their traditions, about their migration and mythology also. So this awakening among the tribes that they can preserve and promote their culture through the social media is catching up. However, Andamanese children have not yet come to that stage. Eventually they will, because they are living in Port Blair now and they are being exposed to the social media. So all of them have smartphones. So I'm sure eventually they will also come to it. Once they do, there will be no stoppage. But by the time they do, the culture and language will be dead. Only 3 speakers are left, and the children they neither want to speak nor they do speak the language. Then what will they promote? So Great Andamanis is a very sad story. But yes, Nikhil, the social media does help in promoting and preserving the indigenous culture.
Thank you, ma'am.
Khushbu, you can unmute yourself and ask question.
Right. So first of all, thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. Since you stayed in that particular context for such a long period of time, how did you observe the gender relations there? So I'm sure that they must be very different from how gender operate in the mainland, but I would want you to shed more light on that aspect.
Khushbu, as I said, I think in passing that as far as the gender, then even in the name there's a gender neutrality because they don't distinguish between male and female names. Similarly, in life also, the women are considered equal partner of life. So they are taught hunting, and so are the men are taught hunting. As far as they don't believe in accumulation, so there's no property. So the property rights don't come into the picture because I find the tribes are more civilized in one way that they share everything that they have. So there's nothing like possession. There's no individual possession really. So the women and men have similar share in whatever they have. And the roles are also not divided that women will cook and men will eat. You see, anybody can cook and anybody can eat. Whoever has the time is, so the cooking is shared, everything is shared. So I was very happy to see that the women folks in tribal areas are much happier lot than women folks in the city areas, you know, and they are not tortured, you know, or they are not overworked because of household chores. So it is really an egalitarian society in that sense.
Vidya, unmute yourself and ask question if you want to.
Thank you, Professor Avi. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation and that work, incredible work you have done that will save the many coming generation of scholars like us. So, ma'am, I have two foundational questions. First is related to the method. During the presentation, you mentioned that you have owned a very different kind of method, or in terms of you have invented your own method because the existing method were not able to answer those problems or those complication or those complexities. So, being a part of the research community like us, you are not allowed to go beyond that the framework or that innovation, especially when you are doing the MPhil or PhD research on with different disciplines of social sciences. You have to borrow the existing methods and you have to be part of that methodological framework. So what was like, what would your suggestion, what would your offer for researchers who are very much interested to and interest to pursue the such areas, and they're trying to innovate some different methods to look at the problem first? And second, ma'am, you have been like your journey has been so much depth, especially in the field. So in sociology, what we call like ethic category and amic category, what field offers to you and what offers to you field. So like coming from the outside, from the community and from even from a space, what was your challenges to offering your language to the community, and what was what did you receive from their side? So that's two question I would like to, I mean, if you have something to say, please say.
What's your name, you said?
Vidyasagar.
Vidyasagar, thanks for asking these questions. Yeah, the questions need a big discussion, but in short, the methodology, I would suggest all the social scientists, you should not go by the methodology specified by the Western scientists, because our situations in India are very different from the situations outside. So the methodology actually emerges from the field itself with the way you are working. So what methodology I followed for Great Andaman is I will not follow the same methodology when I'm working on Halbi. What I was mentioning specifically was that methodology of eliciting data on a dying language, was very difficult and different than the elicitation of the data from a non-dying language. Since you don't work on language, so perhaps it would not matter. But I realized that the same kind of things that we do, like we go by translation method, for example, that doesn't work with the dying language very much. You have to live in the society to find out what they are doing, what are the actions, and you have to say and specify, to elicit the data. As far as the elicitation of lost memories are concerned, like in short stories and songs, as I told you, you have to spend more time with them and win their confidence and ask and motivate them to think more. So you can't work from the out of the box. You have to think how many ways you can motivate people to work with you. It has to be a joint project. You have to make it like a joint project, that the informants are the equal partners of your work. You cannot call them just as a subject, just consider them as subject. You have to consider them as co-partners. Then only it works. So rather than all the time inquiring, you should also you have to train your attitude towards learning. So at the same time, while you're inquiring, you are also learning their community ethos and practices and cultures and language. So when in the process of learning, you get all kinds of data. So that way it becomes little different. But I had written almost 2001, I have a book called Manual of Linguistic Fieldwork and Structures of Indian Languages. which you may have in your library because it became the reference book for data elicitation in the field for South Asian researchers, and many social scientist people also use this book. It's published in Germany by Lincom Europa, a manual of linguistic fieldwork and structures of Indian languages. You may like to read that book because there I given in detail the methodology that one should engage while working on Indian situation. However, this Great Andamani's story is altogether very different, as I reiterate, because the language was dying. Even that methodology which I've described in this book had to be altered. Your second question about what was that on ethic and emic level, that the what we get, the knowledge, I mean, as far as my language, you was talking about whether I had, how did I communicate about my language to them. The thing is, in this situation, especially in this situation, since their language was almost getting to oblivion, they were speaking Andamanese Hindi. So they knew my language in a way, in the sense it was not the standard Hindi, it was the Andamanese Hindi, which has no gender agreement and so on and so forth, hum jata, tum khata type. So it was easy for me to understand them. Maybe they had difficulty in understanding me because I would not speak the Andamanese Hindi. But soon enough, I learned how to speak Andamani Hindi also, and then later on, I communicated with them again in the language that they and what we say contact language. I started communicating in the contact language, and that makes things easy. So when you comes to the level at par with them, what they speak, you speak the same language, then you get communication much better. Rather than you speaking the language which is on a higher pedestal, and you are trying to give the information or the impression that you are getting the data from a lower pedestal, that ruins the relationship. The relationship has to be totally equal, or consider them as your teachers. Then only it helps. That's another part of methodology, that you have to consider your informants as your teachers. And you have to show, as I said, the field methods is one way to teach you humility. And I think I'm a very different person altogether after doing all those field work, because I have interacted with all kinds of people, and I've in the villages, in remote areas, on the islands, in jungles, and one has to shed off all its uppish or the upbringing of the higher class, or bringing education of the higher class, because once you go there, in these communities, you realize that you are the ignorant lot. They are the ones who know. So the knowledgeable people are the tribes, and you are the Buddhu and the ignorant ones. So the roles are reversed. Once the roles are reversed, you have to change your methodology also. So this is how you communicate, and this is how you take their language and give your language. You do not try to teach your language, you try to teach, or you try to communicate in the language that they understand best.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Ganesh.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Actually, I have a small kind of contrasting questions coming to my mind. Like when we are saying one side that gradually this kind of language has been deteriorated, that is a kind of gradual thing happening. But in the same time, when in your talk also, and to reply the Sanatan's question, I think you are saying that government should take the initiative to do something on this. So I think when government or the state take the intervention to this kind of things, do you think that the modern science also, you have replied to Nikhil question. So in these two questions, I have one question more, like when the modern science, technology and the state would intervene to this kind of indigeneity, so do you think there will be any problematic toward that originality of these cultures and language that they have preserved? So this is my one kind of question.
No, I don't think there should be any problem, because the modern methods of government and modern science will only give you tools to preserve it or document it digitally or otherwise, which will have the long surviving life. For example, the documentation that I have done of Great Andamanis and uploaded on the website of SOAS will last for next 100, 200 years. You see, anybody can see what was language like in 2000 and let's say 1 or 5. So the modern science with its all its technology is a boon because now we can document the language in its totality in video form, in audio form, in text forms, which was not possible, let's say 50, 100 years ago. So as far as the documentation is concerned, the data scientist people can certainly do marvels, you know. As far as the government of India is concerned, they can certainly do initiate in schools, because once the language is introduced in schools, then it gets some status, you see, and it also respected in the society. The inferiority complex that most of our mother tongue speakers have will be gone if those mother tongues are taught in school. And that way some teachers will be hired from the mother tongue region, and so it may be considered also the good way of earning money. So it's also economically related, you see. Well, in the new education policy, government of India is trying to do a mother tongue education in the preliminary stages, and I hope it succeeds, you know. Well, as of India, today there are 1,369 mother tongues in India. So I'm sure the government of India did not think of that, making textbooks and the teaching material in 1,369 languages. But whatever, even if they do it in half of these, it will be some success story to be told about. So it can be combined, you know, the culture and civilization can be saved with the help of modern technology and science.
There is a question from one of our participants, Akansha. Could you also highlight on the role of the civil society or any group of the state or non-state level who are or have worked to preserve the very culture of the community and are the remaining members of the Great Andamanis aren't on preserving their culture and language? And the second, as a researcher, I would also like to know how you maintain neutrality and the ethics related to research when you are living so close to the community you are studying.
I didn't get the first question. I'll answer the second question first. As far as the ethics of the work is concerned, one has to maintain the ethics that the community try to preserve, you see. And that's very important because you got to study the community before you step into the society. You should not be able to offend anybody, and you should not try to create unpleasantness. So there are many do's and don'ts which we recommend as far as the ethics are concerned, but we certainly want the foremost is that whatever you collect, you must share with them. You know, I generally used to play the recordings back to them so that they know what they had said, and they used to feel nice about hearing their own voices. And sometimes if they had said something wrong, like if they have translated it wrong, I remember now Junior used to catch hold of me, says, no, ye to galat ho gaya. Please record it again. So he himself realized after listening to his own conversation that he misinterpreted me or whatever, he gave me the wrong sentence. So this is one of the code of ethics, that whatever you collect, you share with the speakers. And not once, but several times. Ultimately, the verification has to be done by corroborating the data again and again with the speakers. So that's one thing. And the second is that one has to abide by the norms of their society. For example, in Great Andamanis, there was not very strict laws or rules, but since they believe in sharing, if they offer you food and you refuse it, they may mind it. You know, similarly, if you are eating and not sharing, then they mind it. So sharing has to be done. Sometimes most modern people think that they are begging. They are not begging. They are little bit at a wonder or at awe to see that you are eating or yourself without offering to them, you know. Because when they eat, they do not eat all the things by themselves. They always like to offer to you. I remember in that Strait Island in the jungle, they once hunted a deer and they killed it and cooked it and they brought it to me to eat. And I said, I never tasted deer before. So I told now Junior that I can eat mutton, but I have never tasted deer. So I'm a little apprehensive. He says, no, it tastes like mutton only. You take it. So I ate it, and he was very happy that I ate his preparation. So, you know, this is a kind of, again, part of the code of ethics. The government of India says don't accept anything from them, don't give them any gifts. But ultimately, when you have established a relationship, then you have to do these kind of exchanges also. You cannot do without it, you know. So you have to decide yourself after living in the society what will please them and what will not please them. One should maintain their sanctity and their code of conduct that they behave. While working on Nicobar Islands culture is very different. You cannot approach any head of the household for data elicitation. You have to first go through the what they call captain, kind of a mukhya or pradhan of the village. You have to first take his permission and then he tells you whom to go. And you know, so it's altogether a very different code of ethics. So one has to follow that kind of things in Nicobar. So every society dictates its own code of conduct, which you have to learn very, very fast before you make a mistake. What was your first question? I didn't get it really.
I think the first question is related to the role of civil society in these communities, basically, and how they are doing their things in these communities, basically.
Well, as far as these tribes are concerned, whether Jaravas or Onges and Great Andamanis, I have always told the civil societies, leave them alone. That's the best thing. Just don't touch them. If they have survived 70,000 years, they can survive another 50,000 years. It's we who cannot survive for 70,000 years. I'm sure we'll all die. The whole race will die before that. Because we are now the kind of havoc we are playing with ecology, environmental, climate change. See what's happening. One by one, things are sinking. So all this we are doing foolishly. So we are the fools here. They are very knowledgeable, enlightened people, and civil society cannot do anything. I've always maintained that the Jaravas live in opulence. You know, students of economics in this gathering would know that generally it is the curve of demand and supply, the equilibrium point of the demand and supply is the point which considered to be the best point to reach for satisfaction and for economy, right? Jaravas say we have more than we want. Our jungle gives us more than we can consume. So they live in opulence. We are the ones who don't live in opulence because we want something more. We always feel we don't have this, we don't have that. They don't. They have everything under the sun that they want. And they don't want your things. If you give them clothes, they said, we don't want. If you give them clothes, then you'll have to introduce them to the whole economy of soap and detergent, right? Where will they get soap and detergent? Then they'll come and beg you to give me soap. So why introduce something which they don't need? You see? So they don't need anything. It's a tropical forest. They said we don't mind get wet and then we get dried because of the sun. We don't want any clothes. So, you know, the society has developed amalgamating with nature all these years. They live with the nature, they live in the nature, and they live for the nature. They're part of the nature. And they don't want to deviate from that kind of life. So the civil societies can only do harm, not, any good to them. And this is only talking about the Andamanis, Jaravas, and Onges. I'm not talking about the other tribes because you cannot paint all the tribes of India by the same paintbrush. Every tribe is different. Northeastern tribes are very different from Central Indian tribes, and Central Indian tribes are very different from Andaman Nicobar. even within Andaman Nicobar, Nicobaris are very different from Andaman. So each community dictates a very different kind of norms to be followed by us, by the outsiders. Generally, they don't like outsiders, so it takes a while for you to be accepted.
Akansha, do you have any question again? Or
Ma'am, I just wanted to know, like you said that their voice of the great Andamanis is getting lost. So, do they have any kind of cultural practices where the older generations somehow communicate or transfer their legacies and their languages and their culture to the younger ones so that it is preserved and doesn't get lost over the period of time?
Unfortunately, no, they don't have any. They don't have any cultural practices. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if it's preserved and it's only with the generations that practice, and then it doesn't pass on to the newer generations.
The language is not passing to the newer generations. As far as cultural practices are concerned, Akansha, they didn't have any. The only cultural practice I have seen it is when they go for hunting, this, recite some kind of a mantra in their mouth to calm the sea, to avoid any kind of storms and things like that, But they don't worship, for example. They have no gods. Okay. So when they have no gods, there's no worshipping. There are no cultural traditions as such, They only sing songs, and those are documented in this book. But there's no song associated with some certain ceremony or something. Like we have Mundan songs and marriage songs and stuff like that. They don't have that. At least that's what
Thank
they
you,
told
ma'am.
me. It has not been documented earlier, so I can't say. But other than this reciting a mantra kind of thing for before going for hunting, I didn't find anything else. And that they don't speak out because it's kind of a sacred, so they don't want to divulge that.
I think it's okay. Now we complete our session. I think. Do you have any question? Okay. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you all the participants for joining our session, contributing and participating in the discussion. I have something to announce that apart from this program, I want to inform that we are organizing an orientation session for DU PhD Viva and JNU Viva as well on I think 17th and 18th Jan. Also, I am happy to share that our first offline lecture series, Margin Speaks, is happening at India International Center on 4th of Feb. We will update you about the event soon. And thank you all thank you, ma'am, for participating in this session and accepting our invitation.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Ganesh and Ramzan. And I hope we connect again sometimes, but I also hope that your audience get access to the book, whether through the library or personal access, and read it, and I get the feedback from it. Thank you so much. Sorry for my throat, and it's late night here, 11 o'clock at night, and so I'm getting sleepy also, but it's okay. So thank you again, and bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
How to
करो फिर जल्दी करो। मैं ब्रांड का फोन चाय बना दी मैंने आपके लिए। बड़ी आदत डाल के वो उबल रही है, तो जितना जल्दी आप करोगे